Welcome to the Reading Rift. I'm your host, Lydia Legacy, and today I have the privilege of talking with author Orin Steele about her new book, By Blood, Shadow, and Fire, which came out on April 28th, 2026. Thank you so much for being here, Orin. I'm so excited to talk to you about your interesting social media, your publishing, and all things you and your book.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm very excited to do this, so very happy to be here.
Awesome. And so for listeners in this episode, we're going to get to know Orin a little bit, get to know her background of how does one all of a sudden write a really awesome, intense fantasy book? And then a little bit about publishing and, of course, spoiler-free content for the book. The book is pretty new, so a lot of listeners might not know exactly what's going on, but this will give you a taste of, is this for you? So let's get into it. First, I just want to know a little bit about your background of, growing up, did you always know you wanted to write a book, or what did you think you wanted to be when you were growing up?
Yeah, that's such a fun question because and I love answering it because I didn't know I wanted to write a book until I wrote a book. I grew up, my dad reads. I grew up with my dad was reading constantly, but he reads so much like historical nonfiction. And so there was like really no overlap there. And it just wasn't I wrote, like, poetry, wrote, like, blogs in high school. I don't know if you remember, like, old, like, blogger days. I had a couple blogs on there, but outside of that, writing never really was, like, an active part of my life. I went to college for graphic design, and that is what my degree is in, and out of college, I worked in marketing departments, and then I had my own branding firm for 9 years, and I actually just officially, like, closed down last year to focus on this full time. And so this was I mean, I won't say it's not quite a 180, but it is very different from what I thought I was gonna be doing for the rest of my life, but I couldn't be happier.
I think like our life stories are building blocks for where we're gonna end up. Like even now, you don't know where your journey could take you, but this step will be important in what's gonna happen next. And it sounds like you have some things that do help when you're publishing a book, like stuff with marketing and design and stuff like that is probably really helpful in terms of the publishing industry. So how did you decide you were gonna write a book?
Yeah, so I didn't. My best friend decided for me. I brought her these notebooks, these binders. They're actually still sitting on my shelf and I will keep them forever, but of just like handwritten plot. I had this story that just would not leave me alone. And I had just started like scribbling down some like really basic plot ideas. And we were sitting together one day in this really small coffee shop in Winchester, Kentucky. And I was like, this story has just been kind of like sitting with me and like, what do you think? And she was like, you have to write this. And I was like, well, Amber, like I'm not a writer. So like, no, I'm not gonna write it. Like I just needed to like kind of get this out of my system. And I remember she was like, no, you are now. Because if you don't, I will hurt you. And so I started writing to appease my best friend. And then it snowballed. And then I couldn't stop writing it. And I still have the original like, I did, like, a voice memo, like a talk to text in my notes app, and I still have that original note of, like, "Okay, here's this idea. Here's where we're going." Here's and it's so funny to see that original idea compared to, like, what the book is now. Because I would say, like, 80% of it isn't even remotely close. It's like
Yeah.
her name is the same, and, like, the fact that she's kind of, like, intermingled with the gods is the same. I'd say the rest of it is pretty much different.
A first draft to what gets published or even like a second draft, the change is crazy. When I read my husband's books that he gives to me to read, I'm like, okay, this is good. Like the first draft, I'm like, okay, your idea is good. And then by the time he gets me his revised versions, I'm like, oh wow, yeah, the revisions are really good after he did
It's
that.
co Yeah, completely different.
I love a best friend that's like, okay, but this isn't you gotta like go for this. We all need that sometimes. We just have a little bit of, even those confident people have the little bit of, okay, but why would I have this career or I have these responsibilities? Why would I do this actually really risky, scary thing of being an artist in this way? So I love that your best friend. You sound like you've got a lot of support in your life, which is great.
I do,
So
I'm
the
very
next thing I want
grateful
to
for
move
that.
into is your early reading. So did you grow up are surrounded by reading, or did you kind of discover books more on your own as an adult?
So I have like that very stereotypical, like I read Twilight in high school, and that was pretty much the only thing I read for pleasure until like 8 years ago. I kind of got back into reading here and there. Like my Goodreads history it's very, very sad and unimpressive until the pandemic. And I feel like so many people relate to that. It's like we had all this time on our hands, and so what do we do? Like we picked up books. And one of the series that really got me back into reading was The Daughter of No World by Carissa Broadbent, and I devoured all three of those like over a weekend. And getting into those and getting into these characters, like it was unlike anything that I had read before. And it was the first time I found myself like being like, oh, like I want to live in this. Like this is what I want. And I was excited about reading for the first time in like 15 years.
Yeah, I think a lot of books now that are coming out have a lot of really strong female characters that maybe over time that's evolved. Like I remember when I read Jane Austen books and I think back and like what she was writing at her time was actually really crazy. Like if I think about it, of what she was writing in terms of like womanhood in her time, but that like keeps evolving. And as I'm growing up, the books I used to read to the books I'm reading now, and what will I read or what will be the books when my kids are growing up, So I hope the progression continues there.
Yeah, I love that you bring up like the next generation of readers because I have an 8-year-old. And I like, I thought about that, like, while I was writing this book, I thought about my daughter reading it when she's old enough and, what kind of woman do I want to be portraying? And, like, what type of journey and what type of growth do I want to portray, that I know she's going to read? It's like, so what do I want to make possible for her?
I know a lot of authors I talk to think about that too, and so it makes me excited for what kind of content is going to be out there for. I have two daughters when they're older and they're reading stuff much older than reading stuff like this. But I hope that there's stuff that makes them feel like I can do anything. I can do hard things, or the world is open to me. Who are your author idols and what books shaped you the most?
Oh man. So Carissa Broadbent was a huge part of that. I also really dove into Danielle Jensen, The Bridge Kingdom. Absolutely loved that. And I like it's like a little bit like out of left field. It's still fantasy, but R.F. Kuang. I love the way that like I love a little analytical book. And like I
Yeah.
love like the footnotes of like Babel. I know, like, there were some people who, like, absolutely hated that. I found it fascinating. So, like, I mean, anything that will get me just kind of like, "Wait, I didn't know you could do that."
I love that. I love when I can tell that an author put a lot of thought into the book. And so if I'm having like a rough time and I just want to read a book for fun to
Mhm.
escape, I can read the book. But I can come back and read that book later when I'm like, I want to really know what's going on, what's going to happen in the next book. And then I can dive into like the little epigraphs before the chapter, or like, I like
Yes.
seeing that the authors put a lot of care into what they do. And I could tell that with your book too. But that's something I love is like, I can read it like this or I can read it like this. So it fits a
I
wide
appreciate
variety.
that's very much John Gwynne for me, like, that I can sit and I can just get through his writing, but then it's like, "Oh, wait, hold on. I wanna go back now and, like, analyze everything."
I think that's an author's dream is like, I put my book out there and people read it and enjoyed it. But are people out there having these unhinged theories that you're like, I never even thought about that. So it's crazy that these people are putting this much thought into my book. You're like, I have put a lot of thought into this too, but
I have
for
been
bonding.
privy to some of those unhinged theories, especially in my Discord channel, and we have a, like, spoiler chat channel, and they, like, absolutely, like, rip into all of these theories and, these, like, hypotheses. It's like, okay, they're starting to, like, put, like, little breadcrumbs together, and they're like, "Okay, like, don't tell us, but, like, tell us." Is that like, are we, like, going the right way? And it's been so fun watching other people analyze, and sometimes these theories are things that I never even thought about myself, and I'm just like, "Wait, no, hold on, like, that actually makes a lot of sense," and I'm, like, typing back, I'm like, "Oh my gosh, like, you might be onto something," like, I don't make all the rules.
You're like, book two's not published yet, so we can work with some things.
Yeah, it's been really fun.
Was there ever growing up, was there ever a teacher or a librarian or an adult figure that maybe looking back, you were like, I think that they helped me maybe see that I could do writing or I could pursue a career in something more than just, you go to school and you get your job type of thing?
No. And I kinda hate that. No, my editor, Erin Klein, she and I have joked a lot about this. I actually failed English in high school. I did not do well. I was not interested in it, but I was like one of those like an angsty, angry teenagers. And so
Yeah.
like everything was like a little painful for me, especially reading assignments when I was just exhausted all of the time. So
Mhm.
no, like I wish that I would have had more of an interest in reading and writing early on, and I've talked to my parents about this, on multiple occasions of, like, how it's like, I should have listened to you guys, It's like, you're having one of those moments of, like, "Okay, like, you were right," because they have had been encouraging me to write, but was I held myself back in every aspect, so, no, unfortunately.
It's like a it's hard when you're a teenager and you're like, "I should have listened, but I didn't, but we can move on. We can still recover from this." And you did that because you wrote a book and you're getting it published, and it like, even just writing a first draft of a book is, like, super hard to do. What was your biggest, "Okay, I can actually do this. I'm gonna do this," moment where you're like, "I'm gonna publish a book?"
I think, like, recently, I was talking to a friend earlier today, and I think part of this is truly a trauma response because I have compartmentalized so much of this experience, and I have kind of held the excitement and the emotional, joy, I mean, really any feelings at all. I have had them locked so tightly because so much of me is afraid that if I let myself get excited, if I let myself feel this joy, it's not going to happen. Something is going to go wrong. Something's going to fail. Like, I don't know. Everyone is going to return their pre orders overnight. So I'm wearing it right now. I got my first merch in today and I think it's, like, hitting me today. We're 12 days out from launch. I have the book, like, it's sitting I
Mhm.
have it sitting on my desk. I can hold it, I can read it, but there was something about seeing something that somebody else made for me that was based on my own book that all of a sudden I was like, "Wait, I'm wearing something from a book that I wrote, from an idea that I had, 4 or 5 years ago, and my book's gonna be out in 12 days." Like, I just, like, sat in silence for a little while,
Mhm.
but, I fly out tomorrow to Phoenix to go sign all of the pre-orders, and there is, like, over 300 physical pre-orders, and it's still, like, just starting to hit me that this is real and happening, and I'm just starting to, like, allow myself to feel the joy and love that so much of the community has been bringing me this whole time. And I've been so tired and I've been trying to like find ways to explain what this exhaustion feels like because it's like the best exhaustion I've ever felt. And I think it's this like overwhelming feeling of like actually like being loved.
Mm.
And I think I'm, like, allowing myself to feel that for the first time in my entire life. And so it's like I have all of these things hitting me at one time, and I feel like my nervous system, like, doesn't know what to do with it. And so it's like I feel like I'm going into, like, fight or flight mode,
Mhm.
and when my fight or flight is, like, take a nap. It's like, we're gonna sleep this one off.
Mhm.
And so I was like, my body has just felt this exhaustion, but it's just been such like a fulfilling exhaustion. And I keep thinking about this. I saw it on like TikTok or on Reels or something. But it was like how lucky am I to be so tired from living the life I dreamed of, or something like that. And I truly feel like that is what's happening right now. It's like I'm constantly working on promotional graphics. I'm thinking about what's my next giveaway. What can I do to connect with the community more. I have 3 emails about, event inquiries. Like, it's all of these things happening and cycling so quickly. It's just been this overwhelming, like, love and support, and it's exhausting in the best way, and I don't want it to stop.
I hope it doesn't stop. I hope you're like, eventually you let yourself open up a little bit and then it just keeps flooding in. You keep feeling more things. You're probably going to be signing the books and just like, I need to breathe for a second because this is like hitting me even more like in the
Yeah.
setting of that happening. But it's so exciting. It's like you do something scary, you've never done it before, but it's rewarding, but you don't know. You don't know what's going to happen when you have other people that can critique you and you got to like remind yourself of. But
Yeah.
I have heard from a lot of people of how this has affected them and influenced them in positive ways because I've seen a lot of your social media comments or the reviews of the book and people are so grateful that you wrote the book. So you're like, okay, there's hard things that people say, but at least I know that I am connecting with people that needed this. And so did you. Sounds like you needed it too.
I needed this desperately, and I trying to not cry now, but I I needed to do this. I needed to do this for a lot of reasons, but I think the greatest lesson that this has taught me is to be a little bit more open to that. And, because so much of my life, I have felt undeserving of this type of love and support. So it's like, I'm allowing myself to feel that for the first time. It's been hard. It's been really hard, and I've made a couple videos about this, from a very long time ago, and maybe it's time to kinda, like, revisit that in a big thank you video. But, yeah, it's been this very emotional experience, and, yeah, I've really struggled with it, and I never want that to come across as, not being grateful, but, like, it's, like, truly fear.
Hmm. It's like this is the best thing I've ever done, but that doesn't mean that it's not a hard thing. And I think your community gets that. Like when I'm following along and you're sharing honestly of like I'm really overwhelmed, but I am also still really excited and grateful. I think everyone's pretty understanding of and supportive of and rooting for you from what I've seen on your social media. About your writing, I want to know what has been your favorite parts coming from a background of I don't really like reading writing to I'm going to write this book and it's healed me in many ways that no like therapy could not maybe grasp all the way. What has been your favorite part of writing a book?
Yeah, my favorite part is the collaboration process. And what I mean by that is I love how many pieces of this story are people in my life. And so there are a couple scenes that were not mine originally, and there was I was working on developmental edits, and one of the pieces of feedback was that we needed something else to happen between Eastland and Ferric, our main characters, before they went back to Santala. Some little interaction or just something. And I was sitting at a sushi restaurant with my husband, and I was just, like, talking, and I was like, "Well, I need to do this," and he has read everything I've written, so he knows the story as well as I do, and I'm sitting there, I'm like, I just, like, there's such a brief time in between, Ferric showing up in her life and then leave it's like, "How do I do this? How do I do this?" And in the market there's no spoilers here, but in the market, Neuraxis asks for something. He whines at like a meat stand, basically. And Eastland says, I'm sorry, we can't, like, we don't have enough. We can't spare the money for your elk leg. And when, later on, I'm being vague. Later on, when we see Neuraxis with that elk leg, that was his idea. And he was like, "Oh,"
Mm.
he's like, "Well, why don't you just do da 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 da?" And I'm just like, "He's in tech." And I was like, "How dare you? How dare you just off the cuff have such an incredible idea?" Like, I was like, that was perfect. It was this little moment where we got to build Ferric's character, and it clicked into place, and it worked so well. And so it's like, I loved the moments like that, or, the moments on FaceTime with my friends, where I'm talking like, "Okay, I have this and this, and I'm thinking about, this, like, does this sound like something that they would do?" And this is Amber. And by the time that I'm done with my first year, everyone will know Amber because I will be talking about her nonstop in every interview. But so much of the lore and like the story and the world, she sat and talked through with me, and she told me, like, no, like, that makes no sense. She reads nonstop. She was like my like fantasy coach. during
Mhm.
the entire writing process. I'm like, "Do people do this? Like, is this something I can do?" You know, and she would tell me like, "Yes," or like, "That's way out of left field. Rein it in." And, you know, so she helped me so much. And I had a writing partner, before we moved out here, Felicia, and we would meet once a week, and we would work on our, like, respective stories, and she was working on sci-fi, and I was working on fantasy, but it was just so wonderful to have someone to just be like, "Is that or does this sentence sound, like, weird to you?" You know? And just, like, that collaborative process that I think is so important to creatives of, like, every discipline, just to have, like, that soundboard. So, I mean, that was by far my favorite part of the entire writing process, and then I mean, second to that truly was, like, sharing and, like, building the online community that we have because we have such an incredible community, and I do really love sharing, you know, little pieces of the process with everyone and, you know, feeling like I get to share a little piece of my life with everyone. That's truly been, like, so incredible.
Would you say that when you are maybe going back and you're looking at the book now that you've got a copy and you're like skimming through it because you're like, this is so surreal that this is happening and this is in front of me, that you're finding chapters or pages or lines that you're like, oh, I'm so nostalgic of when this person helped me with this, or I remember when I couldn't figure out this part and then I had this event happen in my life and I figured it out. Is that kind of how you're experiencing now holding the book?
That is such a good question because I'm yes, very, very much so. You know, I am about to start a reread and partially for my giveaway, the author annotated copy, but we're also doing like a book club style read in my Discord channel, which I'm super excited about. But I wanted to read it before I actually start the full first draft of book two. And like there have been so many memories that have been coming up of you know, just like late nights with friends and, you know, like the big giant like writing board that I have where it's like, you know, I had like 10 pages that I wrote like in pen, just like a normal normal writing. It's like you're flipping through and so many nights just on my couch talking to my husband. There were nights where I would sit on the couch upside down with like my feet over the back and I would just be like upside down on the couch, like, okay, hear me out, you know, and we would talk for hours. And so I'm really excited to do the reread because I know it's just gonna be a constant reminder of those memories and all of the support that I've had along the way. So I'm looking forward to that very much.
This is a question you don't have to answer because it wasn't on the list, but I'm just curious of starting this journey of writing a book. Did you find that it made and being more kind of vulnerable, like sharing this idea with people in your life is kind of scary to do. Did you find that you grew deeper relationships with the people in your life because you were starting this endeavor and that you're making these deeper connections because you're choosing to be more vulnerable with these people about this?
Another really great question. That's actually really interesting because I for me to answer this question, you have to kind of understand how I have been before writing this book. I'm a very private person, which I know for someone with like the social media platform that I have is hilarious and borderline comical.
Mhm.
But I truly like I share publicly so little about my personal life. Now, like writing, that's, you know, completely open book. I talk about anything and everything around writing. But in my personal life, I am incredibly reserved. Like I'm very quiet. I don't talk about like what's going on in my life a ton. And like that's very intentional. Before all of this started, I didn't even like post on social media. It had been like 4 years since I had even posted on social media at all. And I'm the kind of person where it's like I could be in a cabin alone forever and like be okay.
Mhm.
You know, I had been working from home for a couple years when the pandemic hit. And so it's like being isolated like that did nothing because I was already isolating myself. And so in my personal life, really nothing changed because the people who I brought in were already the people who had that access to me. What has changed is my relationship with the world.
Mm.
And the how open I am now finding myself being because, you know, it is still private in a lot of ways, but I am opening up emotionally, publicly, in a lot of ways I never would have thought I would have been comfortable with. And it is uncomfortable and it is weird sometimes and it is vulnerable, but I'm so glad that I'm doing it. But this actually started when we were trying to get pregnant with our daughter. And I had infertility issues. And then I was sick. It took us 2 years to get pregnant. And then I was sick the entire time. And I was miserable and I was tired and I was not well. And I felt like I got judged every time I complained because they're like, well, this is what you wanted. It's like, okay, great. But that doesn't mean I'm not miserable right now.
Yeah.
I had diagnosed PTSD after delivery. I had panic attacks, I had severe anxiety, and I just kept feeling like, why can't I talk about this with anyone? Why is no one else talking about this? And so I became very comfortable talking about these very specific emotional things. And so I feel like this book is like another like very specific emotional thing that I'm like now out here sharing about like, the difficulties of it while still keeping a small part of myself just to myself and to like my
Mhm.
family. Really great question. Thank you for that.
That was a beautiful answer because I hadn't thought about that you could kind of heal your relationship with how you perceive the world and how you're coming back into the world a little bit and how you're receiving each other. So that's beautiful. So I want to move into publishing. So it's a little bit of a change of pace. So I want to know, okay, you were bullied into writing a book. Okay, you're writing your book now.
Yes. Yes.
You don't really know anything about publishing. Publishing is scary and confusing even for people that know stuff about it. So, how were you deciding between I'm gonna try to, or did you even know about traditional publishing and querying and doing that whole process? And then this whole I'm gonna do the self publishing thing. What was the process like to find out that information and then make decisions on that?
Yeah. Chaotic. It really was. And, I am so glad to see so many authors like now talking about the process because I think that so much of the traditional publishing process, it changes so rapidly that it's almost like difficult to talk about. And so many things are kept, so secret and so like under wraps. And, part of the problem is that, advice you might get from one author might not be applicable to you or applicable to the agent that you're querying. So it's really difficult to parse out like what information that you're getting is even relevant and helpful. It truly, so I only queried for like 4 months for an agent, and I hated it because I felt like every single email was a shot in the dark. I was spending so much time researching and it was exhausting, and then getting rejection after rejection after rejection. It's really disheartening and it's really difficult to feel like, especially for someone like this was my first book. This is the first book I've ever written. So getting like hit with that rejection over and over and over, it really makes you start to like second guess, like, should I even be doing this? Like, was this a
Mhm.
story? Like, am I just not, as good as I thought I was? Did my friends hype me up a little too much? Like maybe I'm just like really not cut out for this. And I hate to think about how many stories we've lost to that.
Mhm.
And, I was getting to the point where I was just like, I don't know if I can do this anymore. I'm exhausted. I'm not feeling good. I'm losing that joy and excitement for working on the story. And there is just so much conflicting information because you'll have some people telling you to, do a big developmental edit before you query. Some people will say go to line edits before you query. Some people will say no editing at all before you query. And again, it's going to depend on the agent that you're querying, how much editing they want you to have done. And so anyway,
Mhm.
I was I was sitting in Brewhouse Brewing in Portland, and I was talking to one of the managers and the owner, and they have also been an incredible source of support throughout this entire process. Like from the time that the book was in draft, they were like, "Oh, like do your release party here, and like get in touch with our can artist. He could do your book
Mhm.
cover." And they just like believed in me from day one and just like, I guys, it's really sweet of you. I don't know why you're doing this, but it's very sweet of you. And I remember sitting there and, telling Sam like, yeah, like I got another rejection today. Sam's the owner. And he said, don't even worry about it because you're going to publish. He's like, even if you do it yourself, you're going to publish. He's like, so, okay, do it. Like, just go do it. And I looked at my husband and I was like, should I? Like, should I just self-publish? And I went home and I thought about it and I sat on it and I had been following CB Woods on TikTok for a while because I saw that she was anti-Amazon. I am also anti-billionaire, and so I'd been following it because I was like, I want to know how it's done. I want to know if it's possible to do this without publishing on Amazon. And so I had been kind of following her to be like, let me see your secrets
Mhm.
and, like a little troll, just like, watching from my side of the country. And I made a post about self-publishing, about saying, I'm out, I'm pulling out of the game. I can't do this. It's not for me. I'm going to self-publish. I got a DM like 2 hours later and was like, hey, so we weren't going to say anything publicly yet, but we're launching this publishing house and here's our submission link. I was like, what do you mean? I was like, you want me to submit my manuscript? And she was like, will you? And I was like, it's submitted, so enjoy. And I think 3 days later, I got a text basically saying to schedule a meeting to kind of sit down and talk and see if we would be compatible. And I had the offer in my email an hour after that meeting. It
So
was
you were like, "Yeah, this
it was
feels good.
crazy.
We're vibing." And you were like,
Gosh,
"Accept."
yeah. Yes, it was the fastest yes of my life. I'm not sure I responded to my husband's proposal that fast. And I love him very much, but I also saw that coming from about 3 hours away. No one drives to the beach at sunset randomly. And I love him so much. But yeah, no, it was just we had the meeting and they kind of, talked about their stance on Amazon and they're like, "Are you okay? Like are you okay with losing that as an option?" And I was like, I don't know why, but this just feels like the most natural progression of maybe my entire life. So
Mm,
yes, I'm in. And yeah, I had the contract signed, which is it's funny, I kind of forced a full circle moment. I said, I kind of started writing or not writing, reading Twilight. And that was kind of like my introduction into literature. I drove up to Forks and
mm.
I actually signed my contract on La Push Beach.
You're
Very,
like, "This
very
is
full
I am
circle.
Stephanie Meyer. I am the next
Yes, yes. I'm,
weird
like, channeling
saying."
Stephanie.
That's awesome. I wanna know what misconceptions did you have before you kind of started querying or before maybe even after when you're, like, getting ready to publish a book? What misconceptions did you have about publishing that
Man,
you were like, "Okay, baby Orin, I wish you knew this."
if there was anything that I could say to myself then, and I say then like it wasn't just, like, 7 months ago. So, we're not going back 8 years, we're going back less than 1. But what I would love to say to anyone who is just starting this process is that a rejection doesn't mean your story isn't good. A rejection doesn't mean that your story isn't worth being told. A rejection doesn't mean that you're a bad writer. And I mean that. I hated the phrase, like, "It just takes one yes." That pissed me off so much when I was querying,
Mhm,
but I hate how right it is. Because truly, what got me so excited about partnering with Emre was that they were as excited about my story as I was. And that's
mhm,
what you have to have. You have to have that in a partnership where they see the vision, they are excited about it because that passion is going to translate when you're like in edits. I didn't want someone to look at my story and say, it's too depressing, too much goes wrong, it needs to be happier, it needs to be lighter, it needs to be cozier. Because that's not the story I wanted to write. I wanted
mhm,
to write something with flawed people, with a character that makes mistakes. She messes up, she makes the wrong choice sometimes. And like, there's a very specific part where I've had a lot of people text me to say, I'm sorry, what did she just do? And it's like, yeah, unfortunately, yes, she did. And she's gone. I don't know what to tell you. you know?
mm,
I didn't want someone to look at my story and just say, like, no, like, this isn't commercially marketable. Like, we have to cut it up.
yeah,
I the exact phrase, that Emery said was, "We're not afraid of the dark," and I nearly cried, and they have walked in the valley of darkness with me hand in hand, because I was very open about the rest of the series, and I said,
mhm.
"It gets worse, like, it gets worse before it gets better." It is ultimately a, happy for now, but things get really dark, they get really difficult, and I think that that's so much of life is that you have these ups and downs, you have these really dark times, and I really wanted to be able to explore what it's like, as someone who has dealt with depression for the majority of my life, I wanted to be able to explore what it's like working through that when all you can do is put one foot in front of the other,
Mhm.
and they're allowing me to do that, and so I'm very grateful, and I'm very excited about this partnership, so I'm so excited about what we're doing together.
I have some beef with traditional publishing a little bit with just like, if it doesn't fit this,
Mhm.
then it's risky. But some of the best books of all time that are famous and are traditionally published are the risky books that are, like, out there and that get a lot of criticism, but also a lot of people like, I personally need dark stories because that's how I kind of learn a little bit about myself of like, "Oh, wait, I'm reading this book and this person has this response to something," and then I'm like, "Oh, I just learned something about myself that I've been avoiding or that I didn't know." And because we all have dark parts of ourselves, and if we just well, you're totally allowed to ignore it if you're trying to escape life, we all gotta do that. We all love a contemporary, easy, cheesy, like,
Absolutely.
movie, but I've grown a lot from my dark fantasy books, and I didn't know that was loud. I thought you could only grow from self-help books, but it's the dark fantasy books that really have shown me a lot about myself as a person. So I love and I know that there's a space for dark stories, and not in a way that it's like, "Oh, you're disturbed," or stuff or something like that. It's, "Well, life is kinda dark, and some people need to talk about it." So,
I know, and I feel like writing this helped me so much because I got to then also explore and I hope that readers can also, have a similar experience to this, but, like, I got to explore, like, some of, like, those, like, decision making things of, like, yeah, I made a really bad choice, and now there's consequences, but, like, I get to come back from that,
mhm,
and so we get to kind of live these experiences without having to actually suffer the consequences, but we almost get that, like, life experience, which is,
mhm.
I think, such a beautiful thing about reading in general.
I love when you kind of are like, "I wouldn't have done that in the book," but then you think about it and you're like, actually thinking of the circumstances of, like, the trauma
I
this
might
person
have.
had or this, we're not gonna shame people for how they're processing their stuff. We're gonna there's, tons of different ways that people respond to different things, and I love learning different ways, sometimes about myself or, like, oh, I see another person in my life that I'm like, "Well, I've seen this person do that, and maybe I can be more supportive if I do this, or I can be less mad at them," or something. So, I wanna know about your online community. So if you were, like, not on social media, and then all of a sudden did you start when you were like, "Okay, if I'm gonna publish a book, I need to have a social media account," so you, like, made one? Or how did you start on social media?
Yeah, so oh my gosh, I originally started posting on TikTok, I wanna say in 2021, and it was sharing like the most basic information about this book. And actually, funny enough, when I started writing, there was a completely different protagonist. So the protagonist that we have was a later edition, and the original protagonist for this book was actually Talavasa, the Godslayer, and he's completely shifted in, like, how he's going to be interacting in this story, and he's still there, and we love him, but I just started kind of talking about this book, and because I kept seeing videos of, like, "You need to start now. You have to start now." Is that I think I maybe started a little too early because it's a completely different book from when I started, but at the same time, I say I started too early, but that's where I grew, like, my first, like, 3,000 followers was off, like, that old original story with Talavasa being the antagonist. I think I kept saying protagonist, and that was not correct. Again, just remember I failed English, so we had a completely different antagonist. But no, it was just to try to start, yeah, building community, and the community showed up.
Mhm,
And I think that there can be a lot of toxicity in the book community, but I think when you find these little pockets of people who just want to see people do well,
mhm.
I think you, like, really have to, like, lean into and, like, protect those pockets at all costs. Because I think that's just, like, the internet in general, like, when you find these little pockets of, like, actual joy and support and love, those are the areas that are, like, so worth the time and effort.
Mm.
But, it's funny enough, so I just hit 10,000 on Instagram, which is how? Um I'm almost at 12 on TikTok, which again, it's really, really odd for me. Again, it's like I was
So
super
many
friends
people
person. I
know
didn't
things
didn't
about you.
didn't yes, a lot of people like know who I am right now, and it's crazy. But I had 100 Instagram followers 5 months ago. Yeah,
Wow.
I mean, like, genuinely, and you can scroll through my Instagram, and you can get to the bottom really fast, because I didn't even start posting on Instagram because it's like, "Oh, Instagram's gonna be, like, my little aesthetic, oh, I'm out writing, here's, like, a black and white picture
Mhm.
of, like, my manuscript," that would get 4 likes. So, yeah, it's actually not hard to scroll to the bottom of my Instagram, but that is just, like, how quickly community can rally. So, I mean, honestly, start now. There's truly no such thing as too soon, because people like being a part of the process. And even though the process has changed and the story has changed, the community has been there the whole time. They've seen different iterations of this story. And I think that that's such a beautiful thing. Like my beta readers who read the story for the first time over a year ago at this point, they even got to experience like a slightly different version of like what's in the book now. And a lot of them are like, "Oh my gosh," like, I sent them all, digital arcs, and they're like, "Oh my gosh," like, it's, so cool reading it, in this final phase, because it is so different from, what it
Mhm.
was a year ago. But, a lot of that is, additional collaboration, and oh my gosh, I loved working with beta readers. Yeah, I am going to hold on to my beta readers, like, forever. I love them so
Mhm.
much, and they give such wonderful feedback and, like, genuine feedback. Um, I I'm just going to be forever grateful for the people who have found their way to me, and I want to hold on to all of them like little, like, baby chicks that I can, like, hold and just, like, protect. But yeah, it's just been such a cool experience building that community.
Sometimes we go through life where we don't have like a community, or we don't feel connected with people, but when we keep trying to put like good and authenticity like out, sometimes it takes a while, sometimes it happens in a couple months, sometimes years, but I think that's what draws me when I'm looking to buy a book or to follow someone online. It's I want to feel like they're being authentic. And so I think that's why a lot of people were drawn to you, because before we were going to do the podcast, I had seen you already online, and I could just tell from your videos that I was like, this is an authentic person of realness, and I that's something I'm going to follow and support. So I, as an outsider, that's what I would take away from your success with your community, is that you're just being authentic with them, and people like that. People don't want you to always be the aesthetic things. We like that too.
Yeah.
But what keeps followers and keeps readers, I think, is I can tell this person's being authentic with me, about
And
being.
it's so funny that you say that, because those are the videos that do the best, I posted not that long ago when I was just like, "Look, guys, I tried to make a certain type of video, I don't wanna do it. I am not, like, in the right space mentally, I am tired, I'm not ungrateful, but, like, I don't wanna do this right now, so this is what you get." And it's
Mhm,
like, because the algorithm does not care if I'm having an off day, like, it wants me to post anyway.
mhm,
And I just have no interest in being anything but exactly who I am, and I truly think that has helped build a very, like, specific type of community where I'm not worried about, posting one video and people being like, "Wait, what do you mean that's how she is?" Or, "What do you mean, like, this is, what you believe," or whatever. It's like, I'm what you see is what you get, truly.
surprise, there's no surprises.
There are no surprises. I really try to make as much of me real as
Mhm,
possible, because I don't want people to be surprised. I want you to know exactly what you're getting into, and, like, if I'm just not in the mood for a peppy video, you're not gonna be getting a peppy video. You might get
mhm,
a video of me sobbing because, we hit some goal or something, but I'm never gonna fake something just for views.
mhm,
And I think that a lot of people in general are craving that authenticity, coming out of this big wake of, like on, influencers,
mhm.
and this like overconsumption era. And we're kind of coming out of that saying like, it's exhausting. The game is exhausting and we don't want to play the game anymore. We want
Right.
to go back to that more like interpersonal connection. And so I hope I provide that.
Yes, I think you do. And I wanna touch on, because you mentioned that your publisher doesn't that they don't platform Amazon. And so I looked into a little bit more about what that would mean. And I just want to ask you, can you explain what this practice looks like and also like how is that possible? Like how do you do that? Avoid Amazon as if you're not like really rich already.
Great question. So, this is the thing. I am in a privileged position to have a publisher.
Mhm.
Someone who can, get me into bookstores. Who I can get me into Powell's under the name of a publisher because they are a publisher.
Mhm.
And so I'm in a unique position to be able to do that. But what that looks like for us is spending a lot more time and effort connecting directly with readers and connecting directly with local independent bookstores. And there was a local bookstore in Vancouver, Washington, just purchased 28 of my paperbacks to do a book club read. And it's like, I showed up, boxes in my arms, because I was like, they, did wholesale through Emray. And so a lot of times, if you are in Northern Oregon, Southern Washington, I am going to be your delivery woman. I will be bringing them to your door. And, but we want to foster relationships like that. Like when we were trying to get into Powell's, I just showed up. I said, "Hey
Mhm.
guys," the exact word I said, "I'm going to be a little insane for a second."
Mhm.
And thankfully that got me a laugh and not an escort by security.
They're like, okay, leave
Um,
me then.
yeah, I was like, "Hey, so this is weird, but like, do you guys like want to buy my book?" Turns out they did, which was great. And I know like that's so exciting, but it's like, we want to build and foster relationships like that. And that's where we want to put our focus. Not everybody, again, like, not everybody has that luxury. And for a lot of self published authors, that's the only way you're getting in front of readers outside of like posting on your social media.
Mhm.
There is a barrier to entry to like
Mhm.
getting into bookstores. And without a publisher, that's really difficult. And not every bookstore offers a consignment option.
Mm.
And so, yeah, it is hard, and so I will absolutely never judge or begrudge anyone who does use Amazon, and then this is the kicker, my book is on Amazon,
You're like, "Dang
which
it." That's not what the
literally, and I didn't know until someone sent me a screenshot of it, and I was like, "Whole how?" And so I texted Emre, and I was like, "Guys, like, what's going on?" They're like, "Yeah, we just saw that." So they've actually been fighting Amazon, for multiple years, trying to get CB Woods' books off of there. So what they do is because we can post on Ingram and because that's where most bookstores order from,
Mhm.
Amazon can essentially be a bookstore. They are essentially ordering copies off of Ingram to resell. So they are not printing them themselves. We are not available on the Kindle store because we won't share that with them. We do the universal e-reader. So you could put it on your Kindle if you'd like. You just can't get it from the Kindle store.
Mhm.
But they're essentially acting as a reseller for a book that they never had permission to
Mhm.
buy. And it sucks. It sucks that this can happen, but it is happening. But instead of spending a bunch of time and energy and money fighting it, like we're just focusing on nurturing those smaller relationships with
Mhm.
local bookstores.
And you're like followers that really support this vision that we've got. Don't be mad if you see it. It's not us like lying. It is the game. It's
Absolutely. We have
Amazon's like,
no
"Wait, this is
control
gonna
over
be a
it.
good book. I'm gonna make money off of this book." That's how that works. And so, yeah, that probably was like, well, okay, we did our best. Now we
Yeah.
can focus on what we can focus on." I love that with life. It's like I can't fix most things in life, but what I can focus on is what I should focus on. What's in my
Yes.
control? What can I influence and what like my community can I affect? And then
That's
that's where change
exactly
starts.
it. Yeah, that's exactly it. We are focusing on the things that we can control. What we can't control is Amazon doing something shady. I'll never
Yep.
be able to control that. But what I can control is walking into my local bookstore and, introducing myself. And I've had to do that a lot. And I just know if I ever walk up to you in a bookstore and to introduce myself, I am like holding down vomit. It makes me so stressed out and like so nervous to
Mhm.
speak to people and to be like, "Hi, I'm Orin. Please buy my book." It's really hard, and I have a lot of anxiety around that. So be nice to me in public, please.
The things you do for the things you're passionate about. You're
Truly,
like, okay, I don't
truly.
like growing up, but I want my book bought, so we will do this. Now I want to transition into spoiler free teasers about the book. So if you've read the book, hopefully this information makes you feel a little bit more intrigued or inspired or sad that book 2 still has to come out. This is the eternal reader
I'm
cycle
working on
of
it.
we gotta give the authors time, but we also need to let them know that we want it at the same time. But if you haven't read the book, this is where you can find out of, okay, is this something for me? Am I interested in this book? So, what is your elevator pitch to readers? Okay, you wrote a book. What is it about?
Great. And every author hates this question
Yeah.
because it's so hard to distill it. So this is kind of the general elevator pitch that we're going with. So Eastland has remained hidden from the gods that hunt her for 24 years. That is until a warrior comes crashing into her world and she's forced to embrace what she's rejected her entire life or watch everything she loves go up in flames.
Love it. I think that's pretty good. When you're giving the pitch, every author's like, okay, but you gotta have it. You gotta have a pitch or
I
how else are the
know,
readers gonna.
especially with events coming up. Yeah.
Yeah, you gotta practice it because you'll say it a million times. But it's like, we just wanna know, okay, but what is gonna like, why would I wanna keep reading? Okay, I wanna know what's gonna happen with this mysterious person that's shown up, and what do you mean she's been hiding from the gods? How does one hide from the gods? That was my question when I started reading the book. I was like, "That seems difficult to do," and it was for her family. So, okay.
Yes, it was.
And so if readers enjoy these 3 books, then they might enjoy your book.
Yes. So if you like sharp-witted FMCs, like in Daughter of No Worlds, if you like magic without Fae, like Bridge Kingdom, and if you like forbidden yearning and tension, like A Fate Inked in Blood.
Those are good ones. I wanna know what theme or experience from your real life made its way into your characters and into your story that you were like, "This is really important that I want this to be shown in my book."
Yeah. So Eastland makes a lot of mistakes, and it's not mistakes like, "Oh, I trusted the wrong person and now it's kind of, biting me in the butt because they betrayed me." It's second guessing. It's doubt. It's, that putting confidence on as a mask when the last thing you are is truly confident in what you're doing, when you're scared. And, there are times where she's a little bit sharper than she should be because of that fear. And so I wrote a lot of myself, a lot of my own reactions to things, specifically the running part and like the self-sabotage. That is unfortunately me. Um, but also I think a lot of her resilience is just women. And, I think a lot of us, when we get pushed and pushed and pushed, a lot of us hit this kind of wall where we have to decide whether we're going to walk away from it or whether we're going to kick it down.
Mm.
And I think a lot of us choose to kick it down. And ultimately, Eastland has to kick that wall down too. Aside from that, her obsession with coffee, that is very much me. I had two today. I have an espresso machine that is my second child,
Mhm.
and I baby that thing. And when it was broken for a few weeks while I was waiting for a replacement part to come in, that was a rough time. That was a very rough
Like, I
time.
had to leave my
So
house
yeah,
and coffee
yeah,
somewhere else.
yeah.
They're not
So
gonna do it exactly
Eastland's
how I like.
Yeah, she's not very, nonchalant about her love of a good cup of coffee, and that is very much me. But there are Alexi is very much my brother's. His personality and his humor. The little peaks of him that we get. But yeah, like so many of the characters are blends of people in my life. And so it's been really cool, kind of building out who these characters are in my head and like what traits from, my dad is like in her dad, what traits of my mom are in her mom. And there is also a big part of me that is in her mom. And I kind of wrote this book from two separate lenses. One lens is absolutely just, Eastland, and it's this reactionary, human. But I
Mm,
also wrote from the lens of her mom and, what type of woman would have raised
mhm,
Eastland.
mhm,
And so it was really fun. I can say I am writing her parents' story and how they met when they were young. And so it's been really cool, like writing her mom as a young woman and, in her career as, a translator and a scholar in the capital. And so it's been really cool, like exploring who her mom and dad were as people, kind of at the same time that I've been writing her. And so,
Mhm.
yeah, I don't know. There's like a lot of people that have been like mashed together.
I think that makes it fun for you, obviously, as the writer, but as the reader too, of knowing this information. I think it makes the readers connect with the author, that they're like, this is. I think it's cool when you can read a book and you just feel like this author poured their soul into this piece. This wasn't just a, I'm going to write a book and make some money out of it. This was like, I'm going to write this book and I'm going to cry a lot when I'm writing it and reading it and thinking back on it.
I think until a few months ago, I was still really convinced that the only people that were going to read this was like my mom and my husband.
You're like, "Oh my goodness, I have, like, hundreds of reviews
Like,
already on Goodreads."
yeah, it's like, oh, like, oh, this is really happening.
I wanna know, this is like a silly question, is which nation would you want to be from in your world? So first, can you pronounce the names of these places? And can you tell us which one you think you would wanna be from and why?
Oh gosh, yes. So I have two different answers and I'll explain why. So I'll go east to west, north to south. So because I have it all, I have the map seared into my head. So at the top we have Rimvik, Ankari, Veridona, and then on the other side we have the Northern Isles, Hirfane, Samsura, and Loaka. And my favorite place in all of Alarian is Nankari because that's very Pacific Northwest. When they're out there, under the big evergreen trees, like I truly like I want you to imagine Washington because that is what I had in my mind. Like that is very much like home for me. And it's like what I know. It's like, like write what you know. So they're in Nankari a lot because that's what is surrounding me. And the landscape is so beautiful. But if I chose somewhere to be from, I would choose the Northern Isles. And if you got a special edition hardback, there are custom end pages that are journal entries from one of the characters that we meet in By Blood, Shadow, and Fire. And not only do you get some lore, and you can kind of start again, breadcrumbs. One of my favorite reviews said there's more breadcrumbs than a loaf of bread. You can start putting some things together, but you will also find the native name of the Northern Isles. So just a little breadcrumb for you, a little something
Yeah,
to
all the
hunt
other
for.
places have these names, so you would think that there would be
Yes.
some big
And so
fantastical about the Northern Isles.
yeah, in the codex, I talk about how, like scholars and researchers have not been welcome in the Northern Isles. And so the native name has essentially been protected from the rest of the world, but I had to slip it in somewhere. So
Mhm.
it's hidden in the special edition.
Like, I'm keeping it a secret, but actually I can't keep it a secret, so I'll
I
put it
couldn't
out
I
there.
couldn't keep it a secret forever. But yeah, we actually we learn a little bit more about the Northern Isles and like what goes on. A little bit in book 2, but we are going to heavily be in the Northern Isles in book 3.
Hmm. I'm curious about in the world building process of your making these names and building these worlds, is what was your strategy to do that? Were you just kind of like putting words together? Did you look up different languages that maybe you could combine to make your own words? What was your strategy for making these names of these places and in your world?
Yeah, I love that you asked that, and I don't think anyone's like asked me that yet because I haven't gotten a chance to talk about my translation spreadsheet. Um, it's almost embarrassing, except it's too cool to be embarrassing.
Mhm.
I have this giant spreadsheet. Because if you didn't know, you can do translations in like Google Sheets. And
Yeah.
mhm. And so I have each region. So every territory, every nation in Alarian is based off of a region of the world. And
Mhm.
so I took in the spreadsheet, I had them separated in columns, but I would pick a couple languages from that region that, was kind of like the sister world
Mhm.
of that territory. And when I wanted to translate something, I would have to look at the sheet to give you specific examples, but there are like a couple city names that are mashed up words of like actual like native languages that are spoken in the, like, Earth equivalent of these
Mhm.
nations. And so the common language, the base is Latin. There's like a lot of Latin influence in like the words that Ferric speaks to call the Velosoon. That there's a Latin-esque sound to that because it's, like the language of the gods. But every other territory has like a very specific sounding language and has like very
Really?
specific sounding names that were inspired by the actual like real world equivalents of languages.
I think the Google sheet is a great hack. I'm gonna have to tell my
Yes.
husband about that because sometimes you write fantasy and you're not as you don't have to be that in depth about it. But my
Yeah.
husband and I are both into his worlds, like really into the details of those things. So I'll have to keep that in mind for any writer friends that are like, how do I keep track of these things? Because it'll help you put the words in and track it. Love that you put that much effort into it. I There's another series I read, it's a YA series, but it's Six of Crows and Shadow and Bone by Leigh
I've
Bardugo,
heard
and
of those. Yeah.
what I loved about that is it's fantasy, but she does the same thing where you can kind of envision earthly regions in her fantasy world, and it helps you kind of adds a layer to, okay, what are these people looking like, sounding like, fighting over, what are some of the conflicts under the scenes of that. So,
Mhm.
love that. Okay, I want to know, this is like maybe a deeper question of what do you want people to learn from your female main character?
I think the biggest lesson from Eastland's journey, not only in the first book, but I think for the entire series, is one that it's okay to change your mind and that becoming the monster in someone else's story does not make you the monster of your own. Because that was something that I really struggled with. Becoming something that was I once saw as different and other and scary, and just like the way that I was raised and then becoming the person that I am. There's a 10-year-old version of me that wouldn't have known what to do with me as an adult. But as we grow and as we learn new things and we become different people, it's not a bad thing. Growth isn't a bad thing just because our growth isn't going or, just because we're not growing in a specific direction doesn't mean it's bad growth.
And you don't know what you don't know when you're younger and you're making
Mhm.
decisions that you're like, I'm going to do this with my life, or I believe this, or this is how the world works. You don't know what you don't know. And I find myself being hard on myself sometimes where I'm like, I wish I did this. This would have made my life so much easier, but I didn't know. And so I love when book
Yeah.
characters also don't know because they don't. And sometimes book characters are just like, oh, that's the right thing to do, so I will do that. I'm like, how did you know that was the right thing to do? Like, I just didn't know when I was 20 and all these female main characters are 18 figuring things out like
Yeah.
ruling kingdoms. And I'm like, I didn't know what I was doing when I was 18. So
No. I was still figuring it out at 24, and that's how old Eastland is, It's
yeah,
like
still figuring it out for sure.
yes.
Okay, I love that you said that about being just because 'cause you're the monster in someone else's story doesn't mean you're in yours, because I personally do feel guilty of maybe I've grown apart from somebody or like my paths have shifted from somebody because of something like fundamental changes that happen in life. And I'm like, maybe I'm not a good friend or maybe I'm terrible. I think we all can grow, but I love that you said that because just right now I've been like, I think I need to be able to move forward with relationships that have ended and realize that okay, but I can still keep living. Well, I need to keep living life, so I need to move forward and just
Yeah,
process that and keep going.
yeah.
So that was
That's
beautiful
something
sen
that has been difficult for me to learn, and, I wish that I was understanding that better at 24 instead of 35, but I'm grateful that I got here at all, so I'll take it as a win.
We get there when we get there. So,
Yep.
okay, I really appreciate all of your beautiful feedback in this interview. I want to kind of close out. So, I want to know, how can readers find you? How can they follow you? How can they support you? And then I can link all of this in the description.
Yeah, of course. If you the easiest place to find me is orinsteele.com. That has links for everything. But on social media, you can find me on Instagram and on TikTok at actually Orin.
And this is your first book.
Yes.
What is the planned is this a planned trilogy and then you might have other prequel things involved, or what is the plan for this series that you can share at the time?
Yeah. So this is a planned trilogy, so there are at least 2 more coming. And then I will say, I do have the epilogue written for book 3 already, because of course I do.
Huh?
There might be more. There might be more undecided if I'm gonna continue the series after book 3, but we are gonna have multiple standalone in-world books. I have already said that, Aeson's parents are getting a book, and people can talk me into this, but I am thinking
I can
about
be
writing.
convinced.
I could be convinced, if enough people want it, uh,
Mm,
a book for Alexi. I've
I
had a
feel
few
like
people
people could
ask.
convince you.
I feel like there might be a small group of people who would be very into an Alexi book.
Okay, I love that. What is your long-term vision for your writing career? So you had a company, you had a career, you'd been working, and you said you had closed that out recently to focus on this full time.
Yeah.
Does that mean this is what you're wanting to focus on long term? Or what is your long-term vision for your writing career?
Yeah, my right now, the only thing on my mind is finishing this trilogy. Truly, anything and everything that happens after that is icing on the cake.
Mhm.
And whatever this becomes or doesn't become is okay. I am so incredibly proud that I even finished one. I
Mhm.
think that finishing a book at all is such an incredible achievement. It's only uphill from here. I mean,
Yeah.
it only gets better from here. Uphill made it sound like it's just more difficult.
Yeah.
It's only better from here.
Okay, and my last question that I ask at the end of every single interview is why do you write?
Because if I didn't, the over-caffeinated raccoon in my head would drive me insane.
And
I
Amber.
have Yes, and Amber. I write for my life, literally.
I love that. And I think a lot of authors feel that they're like, I can't not. At this point, I
Yeah.
wasn't gonna do it before, but now that I've done
I
it,
can't stop
too
now.
late. This is it. This is what I gotta do to stay partially sane because I have like 27 languages and 5 worlds and 10 characters and 4 books in my head at the same time. But this is how
I
I
would
stay
love
sane.
to have only 10 characters.
So true. Okay, well, awesome. Thank you so much for being here to talk with me, Oren, and I hope for the best with your book and that more people find you and are drawn to your authenticity and that your career goes from there. So, thank you.
Thank you so much. I had so much fun. Anytime you wanna do this, let me know.